All right, so looking at 10.5, we are looking at more angle relationships and arc measures and things like that in this section. If we have a tangent line and a chord, notice the blue line is your tangent line, and then we have chord AB. If they intersect on a circle, then the measure of each angle formed is 1/2 the measure of the arc that's formed. Okay, so looking at angle 1. Angle 1 is going to be 1/2 of the arc that's formed, AB. Okay, so whatever number is on arc AB, angle 1 is going to be half of that. The measure of angle 2 is going to be half of whatever that arc is that it's open to, which is ACB. And that relationship holds true. This is also the same as when you have an inscribed angle. So let's think about the similarities with that. If you have an inscribed angle, and let's say this is 160 on the arc, how big is the angle? It's going to be half of that, which is 80. Okay, so remember, when the angle is pulled to the back of the circle, it gets cut in half, it shrinks. Okay, this is the same thing. We have an angle here. Notice the vertex of the angle, where is it? It's on the circle, right? Where's the vertex of these angles? On the circle. So it's the same property. If the vertex of the angle is on the edge of the circle, it's always going to be half of whatever the arc is. Okay? So this essentially is not a new one. Let's look at this example right here. If AV, so this arc right here is 140, how big is angle 1? 70. That's as simple as it gets. Okay? So angle 1 is 70 degrees. Questions? Okay, let's learn a little bit more. These 3 rules. Okay, there are 3 ways that 2 lines can intersect on a circle. Now the first one is an inscribed angle, wouldn't you agree? It's an angle that's pulled to the back of the circle. So we have a relationship here that this is one that we already know. But 2 lines can intersect so that their intersection is on the circle, in the circle, or outside of the circle. Okay, and there's some arc measure and angle measure relationships that happen when that happens. So looking below here, we have our formulas. So this is review. The measure of angle 1 is going to be what? Half of whatever the arc is. 1/2 the measure of arc AB. We already know that. Okay, that's what we were basically just reviewing on the last page. Okay, then we have the situation where we have 2 lines that intersect inside the circle. Notice the red dot is in the circle. We have a formula here that is always going to work. There's a 1/2 for both of them. What we're going to end up doing is adding 2 things together. The easy way to remember that this one is adding, and when we get here, this one is going to be subtracting, is what symbol you see inside of the circle. When 2 lines intersect in a circle, inside this circle, doesn't it kind of look like a plus sign? Okay, right in the middle. Right here, it could be thought of as 2 minus signs on the far right here. So we're going to be subtracting in the parentheses. That's the only difference between these 2 formulas. Here's what we end up adding together. To find the measure of angle 2 right here, we're going to add together the 2 arcs that it's open to. Now, angle 2 right here is really only open to that arc above it. But isn't this going to be the same measure, whatever it is? So these 2 are with angle 2. So we're going to take WZ plus XY. Okay, whatever those measures are. There's going to be numbers on them. Okay. To find angle 3, we're going to use the other ones. Angle 3 is open to this arc, and essentially that one as well. So we're going to take zy plus wx. Okay. This one, if two lines intersect outside the circle, so it looks like there's two minus signs inside of the circle, we're going to subtract two arcs. What two arcs would you guess we would subtract? We're going to take EF minus CD. We're always going to take the big one minus the small one, which is always the one further away minus the closer one. So we're going to take EF minus CD. So we're going to try some examples of this. We're going to use these formulas right here. Essentially, these are the same, these new ones. The only difference is adding or subtracting. Okay, involving where the arcs are. All right, so now that we know those, a little bit more specific, when two lines intersect outside the circle, it can look these three different ways. These all will have the same formula. We're going to be doing 1/2 and then subtracting the two arcs that are open to it. Okay, so what I want us to do is to highlight the two arcs that we're going to subtract. Okay, and we're going to put a little formula below each one. So let's say, well, let's just label them all. So we'll go A, B, C, D on this first one. So angle 1 is going to equal 1/2, and then what's going to be in here? First of all, are we adding or subtracting? We're going to subtract. What two arcs are you going to subtract? CD minus AB. Good. Okay. On this one, let's label this angle angle 2. And let's start with the next letter. We'll do EF, G. Okay, so there's also two arcs here. There's one here and one here. So we'll have angle 2 is equal to 1/2, two things subtracted. What two arcs are we going to subtract? GF minus EF. Good. Everyone see those two arcs? Okay, here's the last situation. Let's label this 3. We'll put an H here. Let's put another dot out here, an I and a J. Okay, so again, there's always two arcs that are created. So this one is going to be angle 3 is equal to 1/2. What two arcs are we going to subtract? What's the big arc? HIJ. So the big one minus. Yep. So all the same formula where we subtract the two. Okay, but it's going to be always the big one minus the little one. Questions on that? Now we're just going to go through some examples on the last slide. See if we can set these up and solve them. These are the setup. We're going to put some algebra, some variables and numbers in there. All right, so let's look at these two first. So we have three options for formulas. It's either just going to be half the arc, or we're going to add the arcs or subtract the arcs. There's always a 1/2 involved. So looking at this first one, is this going to be just half the arc, add, or subtract? We're going to add arcs, subtract arcs. Why are we going to add them? What's the hint that I gave you guys? Looks like there's a plus sign inside of the circle, right? Okay, so let's do this. We've got our angle. Here's how I want you to think of all of these. We've got angle on this side equals 1/2, and then we've got arc and arc. Okay, we sometimes add and we sometimes subtract. Okay, but it's always angle on the left and then 2 arcs in the parentheses. Okay, that way we keep our order going. All right, so notice that we have these 2 numbers on the arcs. So we're actually able to find what angle? Can we find x from those 2 arcs? We could find this angle, right? Because that's the one that's open to both of those arcs. So let's find angle y first, because if we know this angle, we could easily find x, right? They're on a straight line together. So let's do that. We've got an angle, so our angle is y, 1/2. And then you told me we're going to add these arcs. What 2 arcs would we put in there? 154 and 95. So all we have to do is put that in the calculator. How big is angle y? How much? Okay, but that's not the answer we want, but we're getting there. So that's this angle right here. How do we find angle x? 180 minus the number we just found, and we get, is it 55.5? Okay, so that's x. Okay, are we going to add or subtract on this next one? Yeah, inside the circle it looks like 2 minus signs, just straight segments here. They're not crossing in the middle. So we're going to subtract. So remember, we've got an angle on the left, 2 arcs in the parentheses. So what's going to go over here on the left? 70 is our angle. Does everybody see that? Okay, the angle goes on the left, the 2 arcs go in the parentheses. What's going to go here? What minus what? The big one minus the little one. And now we just solve for x by doing what? Okay, we can distribute the 70, or the 1/2, sorry. What's half of 55? Now what? So we've got 1/2 x equals, now what? Divide by 1/2 and we get what? How much? Divide by 1/2. How much? 195. Questions? Okay, let's try 2 more and then we'll get to the homework. These are very typical of what you would see on the test coming up next week. All right, this one, are we adding or subtracting? We are subtracting on this one. Okay, so we've got, what goes here on the left? The angle, which is x on this example. You told me we're subtracting. What are we subtracting? Okay, so what is the answer then? Somebody else get that too? No? Okay, let's double check. Oh, yeah. All of it together. What is it? Okay. Questions before our last one? All right, this one. Notice where they intersect. They're on the circle. Okay, so are we adding or subtracting on this one? We're doing neither. Okay, when it's on the circle, this is just like the inscribed angles where the angle got pulled all the way to the back of the circle. So looking at this one, if we have 200 on this arc, how big is this angle? It's just half of that. Okay, so we got 100. So how big is angle X? It's 80 because they're on a straight line together. Questions? So if they intersect on the circle, not inside or outside, it's just half of the arc. That's the property we're using there.